Did you see the Jubilee interview?
Oh, with like, yeah, didn't that
Hassan?
the yes, yeah, the one guy, like, he got fired afterwards, right? Like because
Yeah.
he came out, he was like basically like a fascist, like very
Yep.
extremely right wing. Yeah.
Openly fascist, yeah. Bad politics aside, what is with the fascists these days? Like, they're all so ugly. Like, I remember in 2016, they were trying to say, oh, the left is all weird looking. It's a bunch of freaks. It's a freak show. And the right is all masculine and cool. And it's like, I don't know. I see like a bunch of incels like Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the right.
Yeah,
And I
but
don't know.
well,
The
we
left, we got work to do, but we got Josh Citarella.
yeah, no, we backed
Left is
ourselves into
back.
a corner though, because it's like we can't, like, leftist rhetoric. Ideally, you're not insulting someone for like their appearance, and on the right, that's like champion. So now we also like
I treat people like they like to be treated.
that
That's
could be
my moral consistency. If someone didn't do anything to like add anyone else, why would I pick on them? Only bully
yeah,
the bullies. That's what I believe in.
yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I don't like to like psychoanalyze like the people that get into this, but I mean just the amount of studies that look into the authoritarian personality. It's not really necessarily picking on their appearance. It's just like already you can make some sort of claims that there's like some sort of compensation or maybe a small man complex or just some no, like the average person isn't going to necessarily have this level of resentment towards the world. And then I do think when maybe going on the left side too, where it gets pretty radical, you do also meet people that are a bit like that, where it's just like, how much is your
Mm.
politics being informed by like your childhood schooling? Unfortunately, those people are the most motivated to climb up the ranks if they're in a political party or if they're in like a because they speak with such conviction
Mm.
and emotion, and how a lot of these
Mm.
political coalitions develop and how the leaders just end up being so weird. Like we do gravitate towards like very weird personalities because they stand out and they're a lot more
Mm.
confident. And they have very inflexible and rigid patterns of interacting with others. And that gives us like some sense of like stability and faith sometimes.
You're listening to One Dime Radio. Become a patron at patreon.com/onedime to support the show and get access to extra content.
We think that ideology is something blurring, confusing our straight view. Ideology should be glasses which distort our view. And the critique of ideology should be the opposite. Like you take off the glasses so that you can finally see the way things really are.
When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them.
Philosophers call someone a relativist, by which they mean it's a person that holds that any view is as good as any other view. My simple response to that is this: no one holds that view. No one believes that every view is as good as every other view.
Welcome to One Dime Radio. Today I'm here with Ben Tomas from the channel Sisyphus 55. For the longest time, I thought your channel was Syphilis. Like I actually did think that until I clock like in the myth of Sisyphus, like
Right.
But because like I had seen you pop up in my feed for years, and I'd
Mhm.
only occasionally looked at videos of yours. Like every now and then I would find a video and I'd be like, huh, I really like these visuals. But yeah, it wasn't I think till like the revolution won't be streamed video where I kind of want to like revisit your stuff. I think that's when your stuff got more political.
Mhm.
You've been around for a minute. Like you've been kind of one of, dare I say, maybe like one of the early philosophy YouTubers, like kind of Wisecrack, School of Life, that sort of domain, kind of how we got started.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe like probably the second generation of that because I think I like grew up watching Wisecrack in School of Life, but I guess like when I started the channel in 2015, that was I guess still in that era when they were at their peak. Because yeah, I guess Wisecrack isn't really around anymore.
And it's you and your brother, right? Like you do the narration scripts and your brother does the editing and music, or how's it work?
Yeah, and I mean, there's like sometimes we kind of go back and forth. Like I'll do some of the editing, sometimes he does some writing. Like it's been a lot more collaborative, and he's in Montreal now, so makes it a bit more easy.
Nice, nice. We have really good media industry in Canada, except they all leave Canada. You know, it's not just the right. We export a lot of right-wing personalities, but man, a lot of LeftTube is Canadian too. We have a fair amount of like mutual acquaintances.
Yeah.
But I guess,
Oh, go on.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, I didn't actually associate you as like a kind of left-wing YouTuber before. Not that I thought you were like a right-wing or anything, or not that I particularly care whether someone is like that. I'm not like, my channel has moved in a sort of anti-dogmatic direction, I guess. But the I've seen a sort of evolution in your stuff where like it got more and more political, it seemed, just like looking at the video titles. I think you'd reached out to me like months ago, about like inverted totalitarianism or something, and some kind of collab. And it's cool that you're interested in all that. But yeah, no, I'm first kind of wanted you to introduce like what kind of content you were making, because for those who don't know, a lot of people probably will remember who you are, but how you got into like more and more political stuff, particularly like left adjacent stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, it started with, I think, just a basic interest in existentialism when I was a teenager and like early university. And then I studied political science for a while when I was in university, and I like switched programs into psychology, like with like 3 credits left to I probably could have just got the poli-sci major, but I don't know. It just wasn't my, I think I was just more interested in like human, like the individual, more kind of, I don't know, empirical stuff. I like political philosophy too, but it would also be a little, I've had like a contentious relationship with it because I find it very interesting, but it can also be very like depressing at the same time. So it's always been there, and I've never really seen those as like two opposing things. Like I think looking at psychology, politics, philosophy, and philosophy kind of bridges the two in a interesting way a lot of the time. I think that, I mean, you put psychoanalysis on the title, and you do see a lot of psychoanalysis, especially like Deleuze, Lyotard, like they kind of try to bring psychology and philosophy into politics and vice versa. And I've always been interested in that too, because I got into Zizek when I was a lot younger. That was like a bridge. But in terms of the content, yeah, it was like mostly existentialism. And then I think that's like a pretty common avenue into doing kind of self-improvement, self-help kind of videos, which can be good. But then I noticed that a lot of influencers, a lot of content that was related to these themes, because they were so kind of in like individualism focused and like accountability on behalf of like the person, like they are the agent of their own suffering, and kind of just pathologizing the individual and not looking at broader social themes. I realized, you know, am I just like engaging with existentialism on like a surface level, or do they have kind of wider systemic critiques? And you do look at like Sartre, Beauvoir, Merleau-Ponty, they were all kind of left leaning, and they did believe in like this like importance of like, because we're free, we carry a huge responsibility, but they were also very critical of like society. And I think that's where the content departed, was like the more I became familiar with the subject, the less honest or genuine I felt portraying existentialism as just kind of like about self-improvement or just like philosophy in general. I think it was important to be critical of like, there is also the environment influencing the individual and a lot of these like mental health issues. And to just always say it's like, you're not being authentic enough or something like that. It's like, there's lots of people in situations where they can't be authentic. Like they can't just authentically be themselves. And I think probably the first time I made some sort of political statement, if you will, was maybe like the Jordan Peterson video, where I did kind of situate him as maybe a more surface level or like shallow level version of this existentialism, where he really talks about individualism and responsibility, but like without the kind of institutional critique or the social critique that I think should also be paired with it. And since then, I think I've adopted that approach. Like, I think I've been mildly political this whole time and always critical at the same time. Like, I never want to, just, I don't want to scare people away by just being completely like, this is my ideology, this is my stance. But yeah, it's generally left leaning, but at least it's not left leaning enough for, I still get a lot of comments where people are like surprised if I'm saying something that's not in support of the current American administration or something like that, or seems like a critique of capitalism. So there's some people in the audience that are still like maybe kind of conservative and they're watching, which is like fine.
That's good.
Yeah.
You should be proud of that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's good to have a diverse base, or else you get audience captured. Very common.
Mm-hmm. Was that your approach with, you said that you're trying to take less of a dogmatic approach?
To be honest, my channel always started off explicitly as kind of like non-dogmatic. It was, it's kind of part of the play on one-dimensional thought. I like to combat one-dimensional thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes like preconceptions that are even leftist, like assumptions that are unexamined.
Mm-hmm.
But when I mean like non-dogmatic direction, I would say just like not really like overtly leftist, in the sense that the issue I have like with the word leftist is socialist ideas, which to me are more interesting and what I actually care more about, have been kind of swallowed by this idea of leftist. And to be a leftist, you have to attach yourself to a bunch of other things that aren't really related to socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this idea like alienates a lot of people inherently, whereas I know tons of people who are receptive to like socialist ideas, but they don't like the category of leftist or progressive or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I mean. I mean, with your channel, when I really saw, I was like, oh, damn, you're like getting into some stuff here, was when you had like Richard Wolff on your show for a conversation.
Yeah.
I was like,
I don't know if that was a conversation. I think I asked him one question and he talked.
He just
like
went
a whole
off.
hour, but yeah.
Well, that's Richard Wolff. I mean, Richard Wolff is just the GOAT. He is like an intro for a lot of people into that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that you don't come into this with an expectation that you have to like pick and choose ideologies, because people who get into left politics, I always usually tell them to like avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the biggest trap ever. And
I think, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, like in the Revolution Won't Be Streamed video, when you like interviewed all these different leftist bread tubers, like ranging from ContraPoints, FD Signifier to Hakeem to like Vosh, just all these people, Hassan.
Mm-hmm.
What I found interesting is like some were more aware than others about like the online left being a brand. Like FD Signifier seemed to be very aware.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a kind of brand niche. What I do find funny is like how everyone struggled to define what left is. And you see like a difference between people who are honest about that and those who are like, no, leftism is this.
Yeah.
And that's not leftism. And I think that's actually dangerous, is some people who read a certain amount of theory, they get this like overconfidence that they have all the answers. And I think that's worse, honestly, than the people who are like, I don't really know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because like how I selected the people in that video, it wasn't even necessarily, do you self-identify as a leftist? Like, I think I had like Kidology on there, and she considers herself apolitical, and judging by a lot of the videos she makes, they're very, I would consider them more reactionary and more conservative. That's how she's labeled herself. I just was like more like who are individuals that are relevant to the left. Because I also interviewed like Progressive Victory, and a lot of people would say that that's just kind of centrist liberalism, and it's not really like radical like at all. It's like about electoral politics and reform. And then it was like after it was like,
I find that interesting when people like dismiss that stuff, like, oh, it's just reform. And
but there is I was talking to a Marxist-Leninist that I personally know, and she was like that, like, yeah, reform is not true. Like leftism, like it's anything left of that. So I just find it interesting. I mean, like, I think all I've learned is like nobody can at least agree, which is like, that's fine. But it seems like I think there's enough people that are generally interested in the same sort of dismantling or change in the status quo. And it is kind of like maybe keeping your mind open, and just any change you could possibly do is usually a good thing. And that usually involves some collaboration. And that was kind of the point of that video, is like, it does seem like these people generally have similar mission statements, but I still, even like afterwards, got emails from different guests being like, why was, I'm not happy. Nobody was like overtly like, I can't believe I'm on a video with this person. Like, it was just kind of like, I'm just like a little bit like, I wouldn't personally consider this person like left leaning or something like that, which I found interesting, because that was the point. Like, it would have been if I made like a video on the left and then just had people that I consider leftist, that kind of destroys the whole point of kind of showing the ambiguity of the space.
I remember when we were talking that you were mentioning that you were like going to do a PhD. Did you start that yet?
Yeah, I just finished my first year
in psychology, right?
Yeah, clinical psych.
So this is, I really believe that we need more failed academics in YouTube and less failed actors. Because like, I swear there's just one thing, like, and I don't want to sound like throwing too much shade here to like different creators, but like, the left space is just filled with a ton of amateurs. Like, what I mean by that is amateur in the sense of like going through the left history, because I think that's what lacks more than theory. A lot of people read theory divorced from its context and be like, so you need to read this, Marx, Lenin, blah, 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 and then you're advanced. It's like, to me, what's more important is history, because the more I did and the more I learned from a lot of mentors who are like older activists, older professors, the more I saw that the left was like repeating the same failures over and over again. And there's like a kind of, it's interesting because a lot, like, I don't want to say I've necessarily shifted rightward, but it's like, because like I don't really view it in those terms, like less radical or more radical. In many ways, maybe my politics is more radical in some ways, but if you mean radical in the real etymological sense, like getting to the root of things. But there's a sort of like disenchantment that comes with seeing like the past being repeated. And there's just a lot that's kind of, I don't know, I took like a few breaks from creation because like I started off like not a serious thing originally. It wasn't until like probably my stuff popped off like from the deficit myth and all that, and Hassan reacting. But like I went to like grad school for like a year and a half, didn't upload for that whole time almost. Then like I took another break kind of recently. I didn't really make a video till very recently. And I think that's healthy. And you recently floated the idea in your channel about, should I say quitting YouTube or taking a break? But you were saying like, why make videos? And you're talking about burnout and your contemplation with that. And I'm curious because a lot of people love your work, and maybe probably a lot of people are concerned. Is Sisyphus quitting YouTube? You're starting a PhD?
Yeah,
I'm curious about that.
I mean, yeah, because I was trying to balance YouTube with the first year of the PhD, which was, it was a lot. Like, it was there, at least in the first semester, it was 7 classes. We immediately started seeing clients. You're expected to also do a lot of research, just kind of in your free time. So if my free time is also kind of swallowed up by the program, it was like getting really hard. And I became less really attached to the actual like creation process of it, and more just the business side and managing, the finances and everything. And then it just kind of became this responsibility and this thing that I just had to keep doing that was always in the back of my mind, and kind of missing why exactly I got into it to begin with. And I was just kind of curious. I'm like, if I'm not feeling anything particularly positive about this, what if I just ask other people literally like, why keep making these things? And I didn't expect like the response to be that like grand, but it was an insane amount of emails and comments, and a lot of people joined our Patreon after. And it was just hundreds of reminders of what resonated specifically, what they felt had like changed about the channel, how it affected them personally. And it definitely revitalized my interest in making stuff. With that being said, it's like, I do think like maybe not necessarily this year, but I think within a year, the channel will probably kind of just stop being like what we know it as. Like we're probably not going to upload very often. My brother's moving. we're going to be doing like our internships, which is like you're working in hospital rotations and you're just like not really like, you can't have your own schedule at all. And then we have a bunch of classes that year too. So
is your brother also in the same like program?
No. He just came here to kind of just move, just to I think he also is like pursuing kind of music, and he's, Montreal's a good place for that. So, but I don't know, he's figuring out his own plans. But we were kind of like, let's give it this like year, kind of like a deadline of just, let's just make the stuff that we want to make, instead of just this perpetual, like you're constantly making a video every week, watching the thing go up, watching it go down, making another thing just forever with no real purpose. I think giving it some finality and closure is a good thing. And also, yeah, because you do just see channels kind of die out, or it's this slow kind of struggle that to kind of maybe have some agency or control over kind of how the channel kind of ends would be, I think, something I would prefer. But this isn't even really something I've talked about that much like on the actual channel, but so it's not super solidified as an idea. But yeah, probably within a year things will probably be very different. And also just with AI and the algorithm and all these other things, it's hard to predict with the content economy what it'll look like.
Well, the animations that your brother does are fantastic, and I think I don't see that being replaced by AI. Hence why I don't quite buy into the AI art hysteria personally, just because I think AI I view like CGI, in that AI can do stuff like what you would do for movies, but it's democratized in that people can do it. I know there's concerns about more the environmental aspect, but with just like, I don't know, I feel like it's CGI, like that you can just generate stuff. I don't view that as art. I have a kind of romantic idea kind of art, like what your brother makes, like those kind of animations in the vids, like that's like art in the sense that it's not like anyone can just do that. There's a sort of aura. And that's why, hence, like, I don't know, I feel like people might have even greater yearning for that kind of thing if the market gets oversaturated with like, I don't know, like bad AI art and just like AI slop. But it's like normal to like, burnout's a common thing for people to do this. Like I haven't quite felt like YouTuber burnout because I've never like went 100% in quite yet. But I get like more political burnout, but that's a whole other thing. But like I have so many friends in this space, probably some of who just burnout's so common. Like, is that another part of it? Like just having to make a video every so often, you just don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to like just F off and come back with some art.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, once it became like a business, that's when it really became less fun. And especially because then I was in school, and then it's kind of, well, this is like an annoying thing to have to work on, like taxes and accounting and expenses, and just, I don't know, it's like it just became like not fun at all. And then it really, and that's like not how it should be. Like this should just be a creative outlet. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of like personal kind of family issues going on. There was quite a few things that compounded that. Ironically, school became the more easy escape. Like I at least there was like some structure there, and you have very clear ideas of what you're doing, and there is something comforting with like academia, just how nuanced everything needs to be. It's like people aren't so outrageous in their claims about things and what they're like studying. Like there's a lot of consideration, and usually people are very intrinsically interested in what they're doing. They're not getting paid like an insane amount to research these topics. Like there's like sincere curiosity, and it's usually, you know, their ego's not involved beyond just like maybe your, you know, your last name is in a paper or something. But and there is that in academia. Like there definitely is still some crazy ego things going on. And compared to YouTube, it was kind of a comfortable position, and I'm pretty thankful that I'm there, because I think just doing YouTube alone, it was just kind of overwhelming for me. Yeah.
And streaming, probably the most hubris ever. Like, I get tired after doing one 3-hour podcast, including the Backroom, with streaming people who talk for 5 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine it. I mean, I already get tired when I have a guest, so it's who's like doing 50% of the talking at least. So like, I just don't get it. I think there's something terrible about streaming. Just it's even worse than YouTube. But YouTube itself, it's just like you have to become a hot take machine, or you have to be part of like an industrial complex. And you know, I think I mentioned it to you that, you know, I've been writing a book for a while, which was based on my master's thesis from some time ago. Completely changed in the book's trajectory. It's a lot, but there's a subchapter which is related to the concept that I have. I have a video on it. I'm not sure if you watch it, called Contained Opposition, a theory of contained opposition. I called it controlled opposition in the video just because it's more.
Yeah. Okay. It does sound familiar. I'm not super.
Well,
I can't say I recall that much, but I think I might have seen it. But yeah.
So I have a subchapter in that called the leftist industrial complex, because I think one thing that was missed in that video is like, yes, there's this kind of like contained opposition, and some people who commented who are leftists were saying, yeah, this is liberal, like peaceful protest. We need radical like protests. I'm thinking, well, the line is not so clear. There's all kind of leftist contained opposition. I say contained because it's not like controlled by a CIA or by like bad actors. It's earnest people, but it's self-marginalizing and usually short-lived and diffuses itself. But there's a leftist industrial complex, and this is the thing I find the most worrying, is that there's like real incentives for people in this complex to just kind of tell people what they want to hear. And I see that just, it becomes like an echo chamber. And then you get like these incentives that, like, cancel culture isn't a matter of, like, I think cancel culture in terms of like call out culture more, it's not like just a bad attitude or a woke attitude. It's an incentive where people who are competing for the same market share will jump on the slightest thing of a rival to kind of get their audience to turn against them and be the one who's correct. And also just seeing the left kind of go through these stages of like hopium, that whereas I think it needs more self-criticism. Like it was Zohan, for example. I was happy about Zohan Mamdani, but the way leftists were talking about Zohan Mamdani reminded me so much of AOC and like so much of the hype behind that, and failing to see the fact that this is New York in a very specific circumstance that does not exist in many other places in America. They're like, no, we're back. And there's all of these things. But regarding burnout, okay, I think it's good that you're like, I hope you continue to make videos, but it's good to like take breaks and go to school. And I think it's a green flag that you enjoy school. I personally enjoyed school as well. Like I love school. Like I'm not afraid to say it. Like I genuinely did enjoy grad school, and I didn't make many videos during that time. And it's good to just like soak in knowledge, because people who are in this space all the time, they just be yapping. They don't feel the need to learn stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly like headlines and thumbnail driven discourse, which is definitely concerning. I mean, it's almost like how AI works, where it's just constantly just spitting out, you know, integration of different ideas at kind of maybe a surface level, and then it informs itself because it's informing the content that's going into the algorithm. But I think we as humans also do that. Like we're people that are not super informed on a topic talking to each other like on a podcast, and then that gets clipped, and then somebody's reacting to this kind of not entirely well-informed idea. It's this game of like intellectual telephone or anti-intellectual telephone that really gets bogged down. But then the problem is that the algorithm and then the market, it prioritizes spectacle and sensation, and usually that means overgeneralizations and hot takes, and it's almost like the more misaligned you are with any sort of nuance, the more successful you're going to become. And I don't really see a way of really combating that, just because that's how this works. It's just personally for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'll go to school, because it's, you are in like an environment where you do have to be very careful with what you say and your ideas. And it's truly like, it's a lot of active and constant criticism and scrutiny out of a shared effort to generate like new forms of knowledge, and nothing really like above and beyond that. This is a very like idealistic image of academia that I'm painting, but specifically with clinical psych, because a lot of it is we go into research, but then it's also applied. So you hear these sort of like high level, what is a psychiatric disorder? How do we make a science of delusion? Is complex PTSD, should that be included in the DSM-5? Like, these are very kind of like high level things. And then you actually have somebody in front of you that just has a lot of symptoms that don't quite fit neatly. It's rare that anybody is going to neatly fit into like an actual disorder that you would see in the DSM. That's the other thing, is just how people talk about mental illness and mental health online is just crazy, because they really do have like what we would call like a neo-Kraepelian notion of disorders, where it's like there's like some essential like, I have
Neo-Kraepelian.
Yeah. So Kraepelin was he had the idea that there was like a biological basis behind all psychiatric disorders, which at the time was very novel. This was like quite a while ago. And that means that there's like something kind of essential. Like there's an essence behind every disorder. You can almost like point at it, be like, oh, this person has this, and then this person has that. But there's issues of like, sometimes the like one cause, so like child abuse one sort of source of ailment, like child abuse can cause so many different possible disorders. And then sometimes multiple different sources of ailment can cause the same disorder. So like depression, like we know that a lot of different things could potentially, including genetic factors, but like environmental, sociocultural, it's really, really hard to really know like exactly like, basically it's just like psychiatric disorders aren't the same as medical illnesses. Like you can't actually just point at something and be like, this is, oh, I know exactly what this is. As a clinician, you're just dealing with nuance and kind of the messiness of the person in front of you, and then yourself also, and your interpretation of things. And then you're desperately trying to help them in some way. It just like, it's such a wake up call to like, even like when you were talking about theory versus action, I think it's like a really good example of that. It's important to theorize these things, but there is a certain point where it's like, if somebody is like suicidally depressed, you have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of resources, and you can't like philosophize over this. In the same way, when we're talking about systemic political issues, theory is good and it educates people, but there is like a certain level of like, there is action needed. And ideally you're having collaboration between the two. And that's why I like clinical psych, because it is both the theory and the practice. Politically, if we had something like that, I do think that there's sometimes, I mean, the people that usually are the most effective, they're well-versed in theory and then they take action, like Huey Newton. I mean, I'll say I'm not endorsing all of these people, but I'll just say these people are the most influential, at least. Lenin read quite a bit of theory, and he was like, he also, we all know he took action. It's that kind of pairing where you're a bit more complete. And I think people that are involved in politics, they could, I don't think it's controversial. It's just hard to do. It's just, you should read more, and you should also do more.
I would also say it depends on what we mean by action too, because some action is not all action is better than no action. I think I kind of agree with Zizek sometimes. Like, think first. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the big thing is history, just because I see like the left all the time, every election, they say Trump, it's this time, this election, last election, Trump fascist threat. You need to vote Democrat. Blah, blah, blah. This is, if you look back in history, this is kind of what liberals tell the left since, Roosevelt, at least. And at least Roosevelt gave the left a reason to vote for him. Like, actually did something, Lyndon B. Johnson also, right? But this is like a pattern. And, like Bush, the issue is, and people say, but like harm reduction, you need to vote because of harm reduction. It's like, yes, but the point is you're compromising your political faction. Like if you're a political faction that wants to do something, you need a separate political faction. That's a whole other discussion. It's a rabbit hole. I have this proposal, which is that if one wants to do electoralism, you have to do it well, which means running in both parties, both the Republican and Democrat parties, because neither party has been a left party, and both parties have switched on many issues. And because of gerrymandering, you also have no choice. That I think, like, to get anything done, you actually just need to run in both parties, and the left is so tied to the Democrats. That's what I think is the problem. Not that I think like the alternative to electoralism is some kind of vague idea of revolution. I think that's really dumb, because to even have revolution be on the table, you have to at least try, the legal way, because the only way the revolution has ever happened in history is when there's no alternative scene, or else that's just a ridiculous idea. Like, probably worse actually to even put that idea forward before it's conceivable.
Well, that's what I got, because I got a lot of backlash on the original. I did a video called "The Revolution Will Not Be Live Streamed," and then I had a lot of streamers very upset that I insinuated that, maybe this is like, it's not necessarily like actively thwarting attempts at change, but sometimes it is just like, there's the notion of techno fetishism, where like clicks or likes or views or subscriptions equals like political action. Like people think it's 1-to-1. And when I talked to Vosh, like he literally at the very start said, I see no difference between all online political action and real world political action. And it's like, no difference is quite, like, once again, that's kind of a sensationalized thing to say. Like, sure, there is a difference. Maybe it's not as drastic as like the people that are critical of these spaces are suggesting, but like that says something. Like, I do think that it's when I said the revolution will not be live streamed, it's invoking the revolution will not be televised, obviously. And the whole thing that Jill Scott Heron was talking about was, it's just when things become so drastic, it's not going to be on the TV. Like this is going to be much larger. It's the comfort of mass media kind of already presumes that there's comfort in general and that people are kind of just okay with it. And it's going to be kind of fed to you. Whereas the revolution should be kind of like it should be like bottom up and not necessarily top down. But it was a lot of people that streamed didn't get the point. I think so. And then I kind of, maybe it was a bit passive aggressive, but I was kind of like, okay, well, what do they think they're doing then? And that's why I asked all those people. And I will be completely like, honestly, I think a lot of them just said exactly what I said in that video, but they just said it in their own words and with a lot of consideration for their own brand and everything. And I don't know, maybe it made me a bit cynical about the space. I think like you're referring to a lot of kind of disenchantment and self-marginalization, and that video, the follow-up, it does refer to like anti-Oedipus a lot, and that's because both Jill Deleuze and Guattari, like they and Wilhelm Reich, who is like a psychoanalyst.
Oh yeah,
they're one of
my first videos ever was on Wilhelm Reich, and I took it down because I hate it.
I mean, he's such a freak. I don't
hate Wilhelm Reich. I just like don't believe in that. I got Christopher Lasch pilled hard.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you're referring to his like thoughts on like totalitarianism or his thoughts on like libidinal energy. And
because fascism is because people are sexually repressed.
Yeah,
that was like, that's.
But
bollocks.
Like his quote that because he ended up like, because I made a little video about him where he ended up using like, I think, orgasm laser guns with his son to shoot down UFOs.
Orgonominy or whatever it's called.
Orgone boxes.
Orgone therapy. Yes, there's still people who do that.
Yep. Oh yeah, no, I'm sure if like he was around for TikTok, he would be he'd be doing fine. But he does ask something that I think is like interesting. And Deleuze and Guattari, they write Anti-Oedipus after the May 68, like the spring, kind of a attempted revolution where, I won't say like, it's not like nothing came out of it, but I think what people were expecting was like a kind of a almost global restructuring.
It did.
And they were,
they were for capitalism.
Yes.
That's another thesis. The 60s left created the most aggressive capitalism. That's that's another whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, no, but like they all ask, why do we desire our own repression? And I think that is simultaneously like the most interesting psychological and political question. And I think it's also very infuriating for some people because it does put some responsibility on just the individual. But it's like, what other option do we have, though, other than to take some sort of responsibility or agency for something, at least? Like, we don't have to, like, you're not blaming necessarily. I think it's especially how they articulate desire and motivation and freedom is really, really interesting. Like how easily it can be co-opted by systems. And it's like, well, we need to become more aware of it because it is like something like, you're a left-leaning streamer and you're on Twitch and half of your money is going to go to Amazon and you're going to critique Amazon and it's going to keep getting stronger. And it's like people hate these critiques because they're so obvious that they've become kind of just like annoying little like memes at this point. But I think that's also the brilliance of it too, is that any sort of, I think sometimes these critiques that, well, they're never really answered and people just kind of laugh them off. But it's like, well, no, like what are we actually doing here? And are we really aware of what we're doing here? And I think beyond seeing like fundraising and like education, I don't know if we can claim there's like much material changes happening. But yeah, that was a bit like a ramble, but it's something I'm interested in, which is why do we desire on repression? Like I care a lot, like my research is on like the good life and like eudaimonia and ideas of like kind of human flourishing. And the switch of that is it seems like a lot of people are aware of what is maybe good for them or what they actually want to pursue. Just out of, we ask people, the specific paper that I worked on is we asked people what's their idea of the good life. They write it down. And then it was just looking at like hair cortisol levels, big five personality, goal progress, subjective well-being, depressive symptoms, even during the pandemic. If they're just like reading that statement and then measuring their life and how coherent it is with their idea of the good life, it was like one of the strongest predictors in terms of their overall kind of psychological well-being. And that did make me think, you also look at self-concordance theory by Sheldon, that no, people are genuinely, they can cognitively capture and also weigh how their life is doing. They can actually assess it. And when people are living kind of closer to that, they're doing better, which is like, I don't think surprising or shocking, but there is a lot of that, like, oh, you don't really know what you want and you don't really know what you're doing. And then I think there's another thing where it's like, well, why is it so hard for so many people to not pursue these things? And why do so many people, like, their goals are misaligned with their idea of the good life and everything like that? Like, I don't know. Like, I think that's where you can get into some psychoanalytical, like, strange territory about kind of the death drive and desire and everything and self-repression.
Oh, I was gonna go into that because I could tell by your Zizek stuff that you were into psychoanalysis, and that's something I'm very into as well. I'm very, when it comes to the, which way Western man between Deleuze, Nietzsche, Reich versus Zizek, Hegel, Lacan, Freud, I'm firmly more on the kind of Lacan, Zizek, Freud. Like that made sense more to me, like in explaining just what I see and also my experience. But I was going to say that a little bit before we get like too niche there, just because that is like, we could maybe even devote a whole thing to that. But I'm sure you've come across Eric Fromm, because everything that you were saying, you like, you probably like Eric Fromm. That's like,
Escape from Freedom. Like a great,
Yeah.
No,
I like the Frankfurt School. I'm very into Marcuse, as you probably know. I have a video on Marcuse. It's also Marcuse's who I form a lot of my own ideas in opposition to. Like he's a big formative thinker to me. Like, in that I think, like, I agree with him a lot, but I also think there's a fundamental like contradiction he was at, the impasse in his thinking.
What would you say it is if you could do the Spark Notes version of it, I guess?
Okay, well, he thought that, like, mass media, so many different things have in capitalism have this way of desublimating desire. And by desublimating our radical energies, it kind of prevents us from protesting. It desublimates our desire, you know, and like it creates a passivity, you know.
Mhm.
I think what Marcuse didn't quite consider is whether protest itself can be a desublimation of protest.
Mm.
Like in that protest and pseudo-activity can itself be a way to like neutralize those energies. So like
Hmm.
because I found one thing that like the Frankfurt School and a lot of like critical theory didn't explain for me is how in my lifetime it felt like in our lifetime, because we're around the same age, I believe. I feel like the problem is not that there's not no protest. It's like there's too much protest and nothing's happening. It's like
Mhm.
just protests and nothing happens.
Mhm.
And BLM was very formative for me. Like seeing that made me very nihilistic, and it kind of made me want to examine that. Christopher Lasch for me, though, single-handedly is my biggest influence in
Christopher
terms
Lash,
of
yeah.
where my thought has shifted. You would
Mhm.
like Lasch too, because he's very into he comes through psychoanalysis and Marxism.
Mhm.
His famous books are like The Culture of Narcissism, The Minimal
Mhm.
Self,
Oh, okay.
Revolt of the Elites, Hey, True and Only Heaven, Haven in a Heartless World. You don't
Okay.
really like Culture and Narcissism,
Yeah,
because
that
that's like
sounds interesting. Okay.
it's about way more than just like what people sometimes see the title. They're like, yeah, well, of course, Instagram. It's like, no.
Yeah, and that's
Like,
actually like
he
it's
wrote that in like the 80s.
yeah, no, because that whole thing is, I mean, there's no evidence that like NPD has like actually risen or anything in diagnoses too. Like it is like the idea that there's like more narcissists is not necessarily true, at least in like global prevalence. But another like
Depends on
interesting
how we
kind of
define narcissists too, because the way the Freudians do and like DSM-5 does is
yeah,
quite
according to the
different.
DSM-5, it's like no, like it's steadily at like 1% most of the time because it's like I mean it's a personality disorder. Like when you meet somebody who actually has NPD, it's like oh that's you can definitely tell the severity. But no, that's really interesting. I guess I think I personally like my disposition. I just gravitate towards more of like the vitalism and the Nietzschean sort of romantic. Like obviously, I mean the channel the source of it is just when I was a lot younger and I really like Camus and his writings on like the Mediterranean. Like it's a bit more like art and creation and destruction and very kind of human. And there is something with Lacan and Zizek and Hegel where it's a bit more, and this will sound weird, but it is a bit more like kind of domesticated truths. Like they do arrive at, although Zizek, it's not like he necessarily states that there's like one stable truth, but just his whole philosophical project of integrating Lacan and Hegel and Marx is, I don't know, like I also find that useful. I just think from my understanding is that Zizek's critiques of Deleuze have been critiqued by Deleuzians a lot because they feel that he's not really reading him well enough, and I'm not well read in this area to even begin to go down that.
And they say the same. I mean, like Zizek's main critique of Deleuze is in Organs Without Bodies. It's that book. For
Mm-hmm.
me, like where I tend to find what resonates with me is just kind of like what do I see makes sense of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Deleuzian type of philosophy, if anything, is more kind of like meshes well with the zeitgeist of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like it's in many ways, like I feel like in some ways you could view 1,000 Plateaus as a kind of handbook for the gig economy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that might sound odd, but like it's a kind of you could even look at parts of it, like the Rhizome is a self-help book for how to survive in the gig economy. And I don't say that to like denigrate them, but I say that to like I don't think a radical politics that combats the system is going to like the seeds are there in a Deleuzian kind of critique. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you look at where Deleuzian thinking kind of led to, was a lot of this sort of horizontalism protest. Like, I mean, Harton Negri would be an example of that. And I kind of think what we need is more structure, actually. I'm not
Yeah.
to say like full like vanguardism or Leninism, but like, I mean, it's a whole other rabbit hole. I'll just say this. I think
Yeah. Okay.
you would love Christopher Lasch just because of his
Mhm.
psychoanalysis, but also more like what I think Lasch opens the door is you start seeing like not everything is the left good, the right bad, with this
Mhm.
preconception of like, okay, well, what have you viewed like what it passes for the left and right
Mhm.
kind of as different organs of the gradual capital of the overall capitalist system?
Mhm.
And in some ways, the left may inadvertently actually propel capitalism more. That's like a harder thing
Yeah.
to like consider. I mean, he
That
really
is,
looks.
and I mean, a lot. I could already imagine a lot of people on the left would usually, they would then say this is just obviously like an attempt to be anti-leftist, and this is just like this sort of critique is like not useful or something. And but
They
I
might try
understand.
to, but yeah,
Yeah.
Lash never saw himself as a right winger. He was never. I mean, he never. He always said that he was socialist, and he came out of the left. He ended up. He believed that the left and right were obsolete as a sort of like binary, and he even thought the right. He was very critical of the religious right because he thought it was substanceless. He thought
Mhm.
that they he actually credited the religious right for acknowledging parts of the problem, but ultimately providing nothing more than like really. Yeah, I mean, like Reaganism. Ultimately, Reaganism appealed to a lot of the moral sensibilities of the working class, which is why he actually won the working class vote.
Mhm.
But ultimately, what did Reagan do? It's like put forth some of the most like capitalistic ideas and
Yeah.
capitalistic policies. And same with the religious right. I mean, like, how do you reconcile free market libertarianism with Jesus? Like,
Well, you're
the
letting
whole
Jesus take the wheel. That's
the whole thing in itself. But the thing is, the left too and progressives. I mean, I think a lot of what people have when they have issues with quote unquote wokeism or
Mhm.
critiques of wokeism or critiques of tendencies on the left, I think Lash did all that, but better
Mhm.
before any of
Nope.
those terms that are kind of obfuscating were around. Like in
Yeah.
Revolt of the Elites and Culture Narcissism are the best like critiques of it. But I know I just say that because I found that for me was such a game changer, really.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. I'll definitely check those out. It is
Yeah.
making me think just like what you said. Like I would probably say in terms of diagnoses and explaining capitalism and explaining movements, I would side more with Deleuze. And then I do find Zizek's proposals in terms of change to be less fatalistic. And like it is like when he actually brings in subjective destitution and the different types of it in surplus enjoyment. And that he kind of like it's always stuck with me, him referring to healthcare workers during COVID, like where it is just people where they are like desubjectified and they're doing something and it's just like the right thing to do in the moment. It doesn't have some wider ideological, and that's actually when you see what you talked about earlier, that revolutions come about usually out of desperation when it's gone so far, where people aren't thinking like so far ahead about a utopia and you know which faction is correct here with this specific interpretation of Marx or Lenin or whatever. It's truly like this pragmatic kind of let's just do something. And he talks about the resentment that the left had with the right when they stormed the Capitol because they actually just went and did something. And it's like nobody on the left is ever they're not gonna do that. Like there'd be too much like the diversity in that crowd. Like you had a lot of interesting different groups being represented that had a lot of kind of disagreements, but they were all there because they thought the election was stolen and that was their they were motivated. Like they had that desire. Like it was not co-opted on the same level. And so I think Zizek talking about that subjective destitution, and I think that's helpful because I think Deleuze and Guattari, they do land in a sort of, I think you could go the accelerationist route or the kind of Hakim Bey kind of splintered factions of like anarchists route. That's kind of their from what I understand, one of their kind of
Accelerationist route, I think, is not a big leap.
no, I
But I
don't
think it's a coherent. I think honestly, Marx is the OG accelerationist, but that's a whole other.
you have a lot of theses
Yes.
you throw out.
Well, yeah, we can get into that. I think leftism in general is accelerationist in some ways it's not. I know you bring it back to psychoanalysis. I think that's what you have your mind on the most.
Yeah.
We should devote like a whole topic on that, just because that is just fascinating to me. You're into like actual psychology, and I find
Yeah,
like a lot of people in psychology are dismissive of psychoanalysis.
and I like the thing is I can't say that I'm like totally on board with it. Like it is just fun, but then like when I'm actually just doing, you know, my research or, you know, clinical stuff, it's kind of what's interesting is we do have to consider like usually it's like cognitive behavioral therapy, or you're going to use ACT, or, you know, just some sort of modality that's like empirically based. And that's how these therapeutic interventions developed, was because people like Beck, they went, you know, do we actually know if psychoanalysis is working? Like, do we know if dream analysis is working? And they did start like doing genuine like blind studies to see if this was like having much of an effect compared to just like people that weren't getting treatment at all. And then you're just seeing like the symptoms kind of just go away naturally. And there wasn't a huge effect. So it did turn into like effective methods of treatment like CBT. And so that's what we're trained on. So it is always like, we're always kind of dismissive, but we do have to keep in mind that sometimes patients come in and they do want like psychoanalysis, or they're more, that's like a language that they're more interested in. In Europe, it's quite common. And like mentalization based therapy for people with like BPD, for example, like that's kind of drifts into more psychoanalysis, kind of like the relationship between the therapist and the patient, and like transference is like a component of that, which is interesting because transference is a genuine concept that came, you know, it started in psychoanalysis, but it's something we have to be mindful of. Like it's not like all of these ideas are thrown away, but I think in terms of just the writing that these people had and the theories they developed, it is useful when talking about politics, because I think it is trying to bridge that psychology and politics like divide and I think that's necessary, because I left poli-sci because I was like, I don't think that we're discussing just the ambiguity of human behavior and consciousness and so forth.
Do you know of like Todd McGowan?
Todd McGowan?
Yes, he's a big popularizer of psychoanalysis, Hegel, and kind of like Zizekian thought. Zizek considers him to be the guy who explains Zizek better than Zizek explains Zizek. I had him on the recently to talk about like Freud and what Freud got right and what Freud got wrong, and what he thinks of that.
No,
He had some interesting things to say, because I kind of asked a lot of the questions that are based on like the common objections people give to psychoanalysis, like its empirical validity, whether it works. For me, this is not my like field of expertise, but just at the level of interest, what I find very useful in psychoanalysis is just like certain concepts like the death drive just made sense to me, like in a way that a kind of logical, empirical way of viewing things like, or didn't. Like, why do we in many ways prolong, why do we do things that go against what we consciously want, what's against our desire? And it almost is a way to get us to keep desiring. We sabotage ourselves. And also just, you mentioned transference. That's very real thing, I think. Like, that's a very powerful phenomenon. It's interesting, I think you might have noticed, like being a YouTuber, there's some real transference where like people who know you personally or are friends with you do not like really give a shit about like stuff you do in the way that like a person who views your channel, because they see you as like another humans, because we are, right? Everyone, we're all human and with flaws and a little stupidities here and there, right? Where
that's
people who we know will just not be like wowed, like friends or whatever. Whereas people who people who I meet in real life first, it's like the very big difference from people who I meet who like knew my stuff before. And you can tell like there's just I think Lacan calls it the je ne sais quoi is the transference. Like they attribute something kind of special. And but the thing about this, it sounds like a delusion, but it's kind of like somewhat necessary for anybody to take anyone really seriously. Like it's necessary in education. And that's why another reason I kind of like that sort of line of thinking is because what I feel like anti-authority sort of this democratization of education equal relationship between the teacher and student gets wrong is that in order for people to really learn stuff, you need to have like mentors and teachers who you have an element of transference for, because that's the only way you're going to really listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, mentors were big in my life, like having like particularly I had 2 fantastic professors in grad school who were just like, you know,
no, I mean, it's a very good point. I think
I consider them galaxy brain, but maybe somebody didn't. And if I didn't, I wouldn't have absorbed a lot of like done the reading they wanted me to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's 2 things there. Like the first thing is I've definitely just tried to especially surround myself with people that kind of humble me. And it's, yeah, usually people that aren't online at all. And because it's just like, it just kind of, it's like, yeah, this is my job and this is their job. And it's like, we have the same level of respect. We're not going to like openly, obviously denigrate each other's, you know, whatever we're doing. But it's also just like you see your friend as more than just like their online profile or their online activity, which is, I think that can be a difficult thing. And I think the development of interpersonal relationships and online spaces is fascinating. Like the parasociality, even between influencers, is quite interesting. And it actually has an effect on the kind of attention economy and what is talked about online. Like you look at Israel-Palestine, most of the discourse online is about interpersonal relationships between streamers and influencers, and it's not about the Gazan. Like it's not about specific going on. There's been some like I've said
like Ethan Klein. I mean, he seems to like it really just hates Hassan, and it's like Ethan Klein and Destiny. They make it about their personal beef turning.
I mean, right and left. I think they're all making a lot of money off of this. Like I think it's interesting. Like I will say Noah Samson has done a really good job of he's kind of left that, and he actually specifically is doing kind of like solid journalism about the issue, and he just doesn't really talk about these people anymore, because I think a lot of the people on the left, they get in there, and then it just becomes like a sports kind of, which side are you on, which is so dehumanizing to like what's actually happening. So I think that's very interesting. And I think what you're talking about, the critique of just any hierarchy is bad. Like you look, I don't know if you've read like Graeber, like Dawn of Everything, like he talks about a lot of like human, or just like a lot of past cultures where the seasons would change and they were like hierarchical. I don't know if it was like a indigenous, like up north or something, but like during the summer, it was very kind of egalitarian. Then during the winter, it was more like hierarchical. And you would never know who would be like your subordinate and who would be like above you in power, because it would always change. But they would maintain this structure of hierarchy. And I find that just very interesting, because it's like, if you have power, it doesn't mean that you have absolute power. It just means for a certain period of time you have power. And then that kind of special reverence or thing that you were talking about, like respect, I guess, like kind of baseline respect that people have to like professors, you would have that. But then the person with the power would be like, well, I can't be terrible because this person next year could end up being, you know, I could end up being subordinate to them. And I like that, because I think it speaks to maybe there is something a bit universal or essential about having this sort of hierarchy. And I do think there's something a bit naive about just like any hierarchy at all is to be destroyed. I think going back to that, why do we desire our own repression? Like, I think it's going to just pop up. It'll just keep popping up, whether we want it to or not. And I don't know, just exploring that more and figuring that out. And if we could find a way to organize this sort of impulse, I think that's more effective than just this sort of brutalist, like, let's just try to destroy any sort of forms of power. Because if you even read Foucault, he was never anti-power. He just believed in revealing the subtle ways that power can like influence us and how we're being influenced. Right. Like, I think
quite the contrary. Yeah. He thought it was everywhere.
Yeah, he basically said like, no, like we're not going to get rid of power or anything. Like he believed in, you know, developing kind of a sort of, honestly, sometimes I think he's like a pragmatist. Like I think when you read his few works on like ethics, and like when he
his last works, the Courage of Truth stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, and
I like that stuff too. I think he was actually moving away from his own philosophy in many ways.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I think his early philosophy is It's
story
not
in
not
before
it's
you
not
like
bad.
historiography.
I think he's a genius, but I think Foucault is what he is for the most part, which is a left Nietzschean, and I think everyone lived like that. This is where I think my political philosophy brain is always like, this is interesting as individual philosophy.
Mhm.
What if like a lot of people thought that way? Would that society be good or bad?
If everyone was like Foucault.
Yeah, well, it's like Nietzsche, I think is bad because I mean, also I think Foucault's own life trajectory is emblematic of his own philosophy.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is the kind of, if you looked at the pedophilia allegations,
Mhm. Oh, I mean, well, that's
and
most of
he
the thinkers
died of
that we've heard,
AIDS.
you know?
I mean, it's because look, I mean, he ultimately sees all rules, all constructs, all norms as nothing more than like kind of stuff that is legitimated by power.
Mhm.
It's all power. The thing is, if you have a life with no limits, you can why we had those limits there. It's to protect ourselves sometimes. I do
Yeah.
find it interesting that if you look at a lot of the French thinkers, they took abolishing limits to such extreme extents, they would apply it in the realm of the age of consent too. And
That's
some people like to overlook that as a little blip, but I think that's also part of that zeitgeist, which is why I'm extremely critical of the 60s.
yeah, no, and this is also why, like, Camus, he definitely his stances on Algeria, he was vocal critic of USSR, despite a lot of his friends being in support of like Soviet Russia. And he also, I'd imagine he wouldn't have signed that the same thing that Sartre, Beauvoir, I believe Foucault, Deleuze, they all signed it.
Derrida
Um,
too.
and Derrida, yeah, and it's like Camus did have this sort of like he was deontological at the end of the day. Like there were just like his whole stance on like terrorism, where he's like he would not support like the bombings that were going on because he's like, yes, Algeria should be independent, but also my mom takes these trains, and if she fucking dies, like I'm not going to support something that does that. Like I also love my mom as much as I love an independent Algeria. It's a little bit, what do we do here? I think he was like one of the only people that I don't find his philosophy to be like necessarily that systematic or breathtaking. It's just deeply human. Like I think he was somebody that he would say genuinely how he felt about these things, and he didn't get wrapped up in the abstraction. He was very anti-abstractionist because I do think it then leads you down these roads such as abolishing age of consent. And I do think what you said, like Foucault, I think by the end of his life, he was maybe even drifting towards a more of an ethics and kind of normative claims. And maybe there could be some structure that's just aware of how power influences and where it seeps into our lives, and rather than just the abolishment of it or something like that. I think he was just deeply critical of power for so long in his career that a lot of people interpret his work that way. And in his personal life too, like he was very libertine, I guess is what you could say. But he, because his debate with Chomsky is so telling. Like it's really interesting because both of them are like maybe they would be aligned politically in a lot of ways. He was Chomsky was a trade anarcho-syndicalist. They would have been both on the left, like anti-capitalist, but Chomsky considered like Foucault to be like a horrifying human being because Foucault saw even the structure of academia and science as potentially malicious and damaging.
Yeah, this turn from away from just looking at capital to like all forms of power,
Mm-hmm.
which I think this is the paradox of like the left in capitalism is sometimes the left will accelerate inadvertently aspects of a changing zeitgeist. And what I always like to challenge leftists to look more into is the left-wing origins of neoliberalism. Because neoliberalism is a right-wing and left-wing phenomenon. There was a right-wing version of it, you could say, embodied by the likes of Reagan. There was a left-wing version of it. In fact, a lot of countries around the world, it wasn't a right-wing party that implemented neoliberalism. It was like labor parties.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Australia, like in Germany, you could say to some extent even Sweden. But like, I mean, ultimately it was the Labour Party in the UK that really institutionalized it. And there is this broader zeitgeist that came before that, which was to tear down like this view from opposing like that was more like worker centric, labor centric, to this idea of opposing power, period.
Mm-hmm.
The issue about that is like capitalism itself is a revolutionizing tendency. It's a revolution, like Marx, for a reason said, all that is solid melts into air.
Mm-hmm.
It is complete change all the time. It's always disrupting things. I mean, that's what I think is useful about Deleuze, is like deterritorialization and stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's because, I mean, it is constantly revolutionizing. And what I find is
and that's also how you generate surplus, which is actually what's needed if you want to develop structures that are like conducive to like I think there's like a paper called like Scandinavian unexceptionalism, but it's a lot of the Nordic model. They were technically more neoliberal than the States for like a long period of time, but a lot of them did use that surplus that was generated to then create, fairly substantial welfare programs. This is like it's like a Marxist kind of, he writes, or I don't even think, I think
I'm not so sure about that, but I'll have to look into that before I make any.
Okay, I can send you that paper.
Marxists have a lot of I will say, about like the success of social democracy. Yeah, like as somebody who's gone through like the gauntlet of Marxism and is very
Marx in his, like, it's some like 1880s lecture. He's specifically talking about like the competition in capitalism does generate a surplus that is like, we need that, like, and also this is like a Richard Wolff point where he's constantly talking about surplus, but then he just talks about how unfair it is that all of the surplus goes to like one specific person. That's I'm not doing any of the labor, because that is a lot of like, I think leftists think it's just being anti-surplus, which means being like anti kind of a lot of things that would be considered capitalist.
Well, that you mentioned earlier that there's this critique of like people who critique capitalism and do YouTube. And to be honest, like the general thing, like, oh, you live in capitalism, yet you critique it kind of thing. I mean, the reason why that's important is not because I think it's like hypocritical. It's important because of the incentives that it creates, in that there's an incentive to like meet a market demand for anti-capitalism through capitalism. And kind of telling people what they want to hear. And that can itself be, be the opposite of leading to change in some cases. Like if you're just kind of affirming people's views, not giving them stuff that they need, that's kind of precisely the issue of the market. It gives people what they want, not what they need. Like we have a million different like Netflix TV shows that are amazing. We also have
two parties. I
don't know. We don't have enough like antibiotics for a lot. We have had the same like antibiotics for a lot of diseases. The last like 40 years, there's all kind of things we need, right? Like that haven't been met by the market. But the idea that it's hypocritical, the reason why that is not as interesting to me is because to me, I always viewed like socialism itself is like a transitionary state, not necessarily to communism. If you're a Marxist or anarchist, you'd believe that, but just that like socialism is going to involve aspects of capitalism. Like, I don't think in history, there's never been a change where like everything has in the economic mode of production has shifted. Also, like, it's not like a moral thing, like making money bad. Capitalism is just like bad. It's a matter of like the human needs that are more important, I think. And what are YouTubers, like you could say, are YouTubers working class? Not exactly. There's a lot of debate like within this. Are they like petite bourgeois? Are they?
I would 100% say they're petite bourgeois.
I would say they're the new artisan class to petite bourgeoisie. Like in that, like ranging from how successful they are. Like they can be like full on bourgeois maybe in some cases, but usually petite bourgeois because you're working under a platform you don't really own means of production.
No, you're I think I always say we are subcontractors, like legally that is like we have no say in how, or even any insight into how the algorithm actually functions, and we don't really get to decide on what YouTube does like at all. Like that is a completely like, we are making money for them at the end of the day.
Right.
It's a much more comfortable position than like somebody working at a factory.
And there's a lot of power too. Like, but I view the artisan class. That's the thing. Some people point this as an attack, but there's a reason why like the artisan class was revolutionary in the most of like the bourgeois revolutions. It wasn't bourgeoisie, big bourgeoisie. It was like in large part the artisan class who had heavy intellectual power, had heavy incentives.
Some wealth, like they have some
Yeah.
surplus usually. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the case of like, the French American Revolution, a lot of just craftsmen,
Yeah.
artisans, stuff like that, who weren't didn't have anything to lose but their chains. But I mean, that's kind of why Marxism is a thing in the first place, right?
Mhm.
Because that goes into crisis, like that whole ideal of like everyone being able to own a little property. The Jeffersonian utopia kind of goes into crisis when you have most of the people who don't own shit, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I don't know, this kind of critique about like, oh, YouTubers, are they whatever? Is it hypocritical? They make money. That to me is
No, I
less
don't.
interesting. It's just the incentives. Like the incentives to me I think are very important.
Yeah.
Because like if you're just like a brand, we should be careful not like misconstruing the brand for a reality.
Hmm.
And the big thing about the brand too, that's why I liked FD Signifier for being so aware of it. Like FD Signifier was like, yeah, this is like, it is a brand, it's a business. The issue is I see some people who consider themselves to be more radical, like who will
Yeah.
be Marxist, Leninist, whatever.
Yeah.
They very much are pushing a brand.
Yeah.
And it's not even like that itself is like a sin or something. It's just like to be self-aware of that. Like it's really important to be aware of that, because you end up putting something that seems like it has coherence to it that actually doesn't upon closer examination. And my next video, which explains every single type of Marxism, aims to kind of collapse this, because when you really like look at all these contradictions, you really see how this all falls apart. Like really, what is Marxism-Leninism today is a kind of mere aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'll
be a controversial one.
Yeah, and I'm not one of these people who thinks, oh, tankies are like fascists or whatever. It's not like a thing that I think they're a problem.
Yeah.
It's just that there's this crazy delusions out there. And sometimes, like, I think that's dangerous when I see, I'm inclined to actually think false hope is worse than nihilism. False hope is like just as crippling.
Well, that's the Zizek's
scope.
courage of hopelessness.
Yeah.
We have to, the light at the end of the tunnel could just be another oncoming train. So it's that is where like I think Lacanian, like his project does actually make more sense as a means of actual change compared to some other proposals.
Can I ask you one more?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because we're going to continue this at a different point in the back room, about probably psychoanalysis. But I have to ask a question, which is like, when, if ever, did you have a radicalizing point? And look, the question of radicalization can be problematized, but it's something that like people do seem to want to know. From what I've seen, like if you did have a particular like moment of radicalization, or if ever, or if you even believe in that concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been like super gradual. Like I think one of them I could think of is maybe like the Zizek-Peterson debate, because I'd say Zizek got me into philosophy, and then Peterson, I wouldn't say he got me into psychology, but he was like somebody when he was just doing his like little lectures on, maps of meaning and stuff, like it was interesting. It was like existentialism. It didn't seem too harmful. Seeing that debate, like what unfolded, it was just like, no, this guy is like a complete joke in terms of like any sort of higher level thinking and what he's trying to propose. And that was maybe one of them. I think, moving to Montreal, you end up getting the woke mind virus too. That's what happens here a lot. So it's because I'm originally from rural Alberta. So it's
ooh, yes, that's right. You're from a small town. Like
from a small town. Sorry?
Like just like Peterson. Small town.
Well, yeah, small town Alberta, McGill Clinical Psychology. We're
We're gonna talk about that next time. The woke mind virus.
No, I mean, like, I'm joking. It's.
I mean, like, obviously, I presume that both of us don't have a kind of like nuanced look at whatever that is.
Yeah,
I do think there is. I do think there is something. I call it the urban monoculture, but it's just like there's something about cities. If you know, you know.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know, you meet so many different people and from so many different backgrounds. And it's like, for the most part, it's actually, if you're fairly open-minded, it's just more about like, do I just get along with this person? And a lot of these other things don't really matter as much. But then at the same time, you learn more about kind of like I do think intersectionality is an important thing. Like, these people have like unique experiences because of their identity and how they're treated exactly. And this person's your friend now, and now you're a bit more aware of it. Like, I think that that's a pretty natural and healthy progression in terms of understanding politics and identity and a lot of these like more cultural and social issues. I think if a lot of that is just based from like Twitter and like social media, then you're not really getting that human element. And I think you can end up with maybe like a pathological version of it that's a lot less like tempered. But yeah, and I guess lastly, yeah, COVID was definitely a radicalizing point, like seeing a lot of these things break down, seeing kind of the inefficiency in both government and in the market in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I think it's just that fundamental like realization that like, yeah, a lot of people are suffering, like people go through an existential crisis, but it's not just at the individual level where these things are rooted. That is something that I think a lot of conservatives, that is not a leap that they will make. It is really like at the individual level where change has to come when it comes to like individual suffering. So I think that just realizing that definitely had an effect.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to talk about psychoanalysis more and some of these themes in the Backroom, which you can get access to by becoming a patron. If you haven't already, you get access to over 70 exclusive episodes. Very cheap, too. Less than the price of a latte for a whole month. Get all that content, some food for thought, some nutrition for the brain, and you boycott Starbucks. So, yeah. And if you haven't heard of Sisyphus, if you're somehow living under a rock, you should check out his stuff. Yeah. Especially if you're a person who's been listening to this show, I'd be curious what people think of the interviews in The Revolution Won't Be Streamed, because I thought that was important.
That one's The Revolution Will Not Be Uploaded.
Will not be uploaded.
Streamed was that's the one that made Vosh upset, was the first one. And then I talked to Vosh in the second one and a lot of others.
Okay.
Yeah.
It like at least opened up a discussion. Like, it definitely doesn't provide answers, but I think it's revealing. It's revealing because when I saw all those interviews of the creators, I'm like, yeah, like it's good to actually like ask these basic questions. Like, what do you actually believe?
Yep.
What is that? Because you'd be surprised how little that gets asked in left discourses. But
well, I'm glad. I actually appreciate that you like that, because that's definitely something I like worked hard on, and I don't think it made much of a splash. I don't think it really changed anything. Not that I had hopes of it doing so, but
because you didn't tell people what they want to hear. Like, it's very
it was an uncomfortable and ambiguous kind of conclusion. Like, which is kind of the whole point, is like, I don't find that this platform is necessarily going to give that answer. Like, I think at the end, some like rallying cry of like, oh yeah, all these people are going to really make a huge difference. And it's just like patting ourselves on the back. I also didn't really want to make something like that. It wouldn't have been honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll see you next time, and see y'all listeners in the back room. Thanks for being here.
My only hope is that when enough people become pessimist, then out of despair somebody maybe does something. But you know why I also like to be a pessimist? Because it's the only way to have a nice life. If you're an optimist, then always bad things happen and you are always disappointed. When you are a pessimist, then you look around, okay, there are bad, but from time to time something nice happens, and you are, as a pessimist, you are a little bit glad all the time, no?
You are listening to One Dime Radio. Become a patron at patreon.com/onedime to support the show and get access to extra content.